Your mindset is either your weapon or your weakness. Most people never realize this brutal truth until it's too late. While you're listening to this right now, someone with the exact same opportunities as you is crushing their goals, dominating their field, and living the life you only dream about. The difference isn't talent, luck, or connections. The difference is how they think. Let me be brutally honest with you. 99% of people are mentally weak. They crumble under pressure, make excuses when things get hard, and settle for mediocrity because they don't have the mental strength to push through. They live their entire lives trapped in their own minds, never realizing that their thoughts are the prison keeping them from everything they want. But here's what champions understand that you don't. Your mind isn't just something you use to think with. It's the most powerful weapon in your arsenal. And when you learn to control it, you can dominate any area of your life. Champions don't just have different habits or strategies. They have completely different operating systems in their heads. You think you're mentally tough. You think you can handle pressure. You think you know what it takes to win. Let me tell you something that's going to shatter everything you believe about mental strength. You're not even close to champion level thinking yet. And by the time we're done, you'll understand exactly why most people stay stuck while champions dominate everything they touch. This isn't just another motivational speech. This is a complete mental transformation. You're about to discover the exact psychological patterns that separate winners from losers, champions from quitters, and legends from the forgotten. But here's the thing most people will never understand. Knowledge without application is worthless. Champions don't just learn these principles, they live them, breathe them, and become them. Every second you waste thinking like average people, you're losing money, opportunities, and time you'll never get back. While you hesitate, someone else is already applying these principles. While you doubt, champions are already 3 steps ahead. The question isn't whether these principles work. The question is whether you have the courage to apply them. Chapter 1. The brutal truth about mental weakness. Most people are mentally fragile and don't even know it. They walk through life thinking they're tough, thinking they can handle anything, thinking they're ready for success. But the moment real pressure hits, the moment life throws them a curveball, the moment they face actual adversity, they crumble like a house of cards. Here's what's happening in your mind right now that you don't even realize. You're running on autopilot, letting your emotions control your actions, letting fear dictate your decisions, and letting doubt sabotage your potential. You think you're making conscious choices, but you're actually being controlled by mental patterns you've never examined. The average person's mind is chaos. It's a constant stream of negative thoughts, self-doubt, excuses, and limitations. They wake up already defeated, go through their day reacting to circumstances instead of creating them, and go to bed wondering why they're not where they want to be. This is mental weakness, and it's destroying your life. But here's what's even worse. Most people actually enjoy their mental weakness. They love having excuses. They love being victims. They love pointing to external circumstances and saying, "That's why I can't succeed." Because taking responsibility for their mindset, taking control of their thoughts, and doing the mental work required to win is too hard. Champions operate on a completely different level. They don't just think positive thoughts. They program their minds for victory. They don't just hope for success. They engineer it through relentless mental discipline. They don't just want to win. They expect to win because they've trained their minds to accept nothing less. The first mental trap that keeps people weak is the comfort zone addiction. You've become so comfortable with mediocrity that excellence feels foreign. You've convinced yourself that your current level is acceptable, that your current results are okay, that your current life is fine, but fine is the enemy of extraordinary. Good enough is the enemy of greatness. Champions are allergic to comfort. They seek discomfort because they know that's where growth happens. They deliberately put themselves in challenging situations Because they know pressure creates diamonds. They don't avoid difficult conversations, hard decisions, or uncomfortable truths. They run toward them because they know that's where the real rewards are. The second mental trap is the excuse factory. Your mind has become a manufacturing plant for reasons why you can't succeed. I don't have time. I don't have money. I don't have connections. I don't have experience. I don't have support. These aren't reasons. These are excuses, and excuses are the enemy of execution. Champions don't make excuses. They make solutions. When faced with an obstacle, they don't ask, "Why me?" They ask, "How can I use this?" When confronted with a limitation, they don't see a barrier. They see a challenge to overcome. When presented with a problem, they don't see a reason to quit. They see an opportunity to prove their mental toughness. The third mental trap is the victim mentality. You've convinced yourself that life is happening to you instead of realizing that you're creating your life through your thoughts, decisions, and actions. You blame your circumstances, your upbringing, your competition, your boss, your economy, your luck. But champions know the truth. Life doesn't happen to you. You happen to life. Champions take extreme ownership of everything in their lives. They don't blame external factors for their failures. They examine their own mindset, their own decisions, their own effort. They know that blaming others is giving away their power, and champions never give away their power. They take responsibility, not because they're at fault, but because they know responsibility is the price of control. Stop right now and ask yourself this question. Which mental trap are you living in? Are you addicted to comfort? Are you manufacturing excuses? Are you playing the victim? Be honest with yourself, because if you can't face the truth about your current mental state, you'll never develop the mental strength to change it. Here's what champions do differently. They audit their thoughts like a business audits their finances. They examine every belief, every assumption, every mental pattern. They ask themselves, is this thought helping me win or helping me lose? If it's not serving their success, they eliminate it. If it's not moving them forward, they replace it. But here's what's even more important. Champions don't just remove negative thoughts. They install positive programming. They don't just stop thinking like losers. They start thinking like winners. They don't just eliminate weakness. They build strength. They understand that mental transformation isn't about removing bad thoughts. It's about installing better ones. The difference between champions and everyone else isn't talent. It's mental programming. Champions have programmed their minds for success, while everyone else has programmed their minds for failure. Champions expect to win, while everyone else expects to lose. Champions see opportunities, while everyone else sees obstacles. Champions focus on solutions, while everyone else focuses on problems. You think you understand mental toughness? You think you know what it means to be mentally strong? Let me tell you something that's going to humble you. Real mental toughness isn't about being emotionless. It's about feeling the fear and acting anyway. It's about experiencing doubt and pushing through it. It's about facing failure and using it as fuel. Champions feel the same emotions you feel. They experience fear, doubt, anxiety, and uncertainty. The difference is, they don't let these emotions control their actions. They feel the fear and do it anyway. They experience doubt and push through it. They face uncertainty and use it as motivation to work harder. Mental weakness is letting your emotions make your decisions. Mental strength is making your decisions despite your emotions. Mental weakness is avoiding anything that makes you uncomfortable. Mental strength is seeking discomfort because you know it makes you stronger. Mental weakness is making excuses when things get hard. Mental strength is finding solutions when things get impossible. But here's the brutal truth about your current mental state. You're not even close to champion-level thinking yet. You're still making decisions based on how you feel instead of what you know you need to do. You're still avoiding discomfort instead of embracing it. You're still making excuses instead of making progress. The gap between where you are and where champions operate is massive. But here's the good news. That gap can be closed. That distance can be traveled. That transformation can happen. But only if you're willing to do the mental work that 99% of people refuse to do. Champions don't just think differently. They think relentlessly. They don't just have positive thoughts. They have systematic positive thinking. They don't just believe in themselves. They have unshakable self-belief built on a foundation of mental discipline. They don't just hope for success. They program their minds for inevitable victory. You want to know the real secret? Champions are not born. They're made. They're forged through mental discipline, shaped by relentless practice, and created through systematic thinking. Every champion you admire was once exactly where you are right now. The difference is, they made the decision to change their mental programming. But here's what separates the champions from the wannabes. Champions don't just learn about mental toughness. They live it. They don't just understand these principles. They apply them ruthlessly. They don't just want to change their minds. They commit to the daily practice required to transform their thinking. Most people will listen to this and do nothing. They'll nod their heads, agree with the principles, and go back to their old mental patterns. They'll get excited about the possibility of change, but never commit to the process of transformation. They'll want the results of champion thinking, without doing the work of champion thinking. You're different. You're here because you're ready to face the brutal truth about your mental weakness. You're ready to examine your thoughts, challenge your beliefs, and transform your mindset. You're ready to stop making excuses and start making progress. You're ready to stop being a victim and start being a champion. But understanding your mental weakness is just the beginning. Recognizing the traps is just the first step. Acknowledging your current limitations is just the foundation. The real work begins when you start building the mental strength to overcome them. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Champions. Champions don't just act different. Their brains are wired different. While you're thinking about what might go wrong, champions are focused on what will go right. While you're analyzing the obstacles, champions are creating the solutions. While you're debating whether you can do it, champions are already doing it. The neuroscience of champion thinking is fascinating. When researchers study the brains of elite performers, they discover something remarkable. Champions have trained their brains to operate in a completely different way than average people. They've literally rewired their neural pathways to support success instead of sabotage it. Here's what's happening in your brain right now that you don't realize. Every thought you think creates a neural pathway. Every belief you hold strengthens certain connections. Every mental pattern you repeat becomes automatic. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on your thoughts, and most people are unconsciously programming themselves for failure. The average person's brain is wired for survival, not success. It's wired to avoid pain, not pursue pleasure. It's wired to stay safe, not take risks. It's wired to maintain the status quo, not create change. This is why most people struggle to achieve extraordinary results. Their brains are literally working against them. But champions have hacked this system. They've learned to rewire their brains for success. They've trained their minds to seek opportunity instead of avoid risk. They've programmed their thoughts to focus on possibilities instead of limitations. They've created mental patterns that support their goals instead of sabotage them. The first psychological principle that separates champions from everyone else is future-focused thinking. While average people are trapped in the past or worried about the present, champions are living in the future. They're not just thinking about what they want to achieve. They're thinking from the perspective of having already achieved it. Champions don't just set goals. They create inevitable futures. They don't just hope for success. They plan for it, prepare for it, and expect it. They don't just want to win. They see themselves as winners who haven't won yet. This isn't positive thinking. This is strategic thinking. When you think from the future, everything changes. Instead of asking, "Can I do this?" you ask, "How will I do this?" Instead of wondering, "What if I fail?" you ask, "How will I succeed?" Instead of focusing on the problems, you focus on the solutions. Instead of seeing obstacles, you see stepping stones. The second psychological principle is ownership thinking. Champions don't just take responsibility for their actions, they take ownership of their results. They don't just control what they can control. They find ways to influence what they can't control. They don't just accept their circumstances, they create their circumstances. Ownership thinking means you stop being a victim of your environment and start being the architect of your destiny. You stop reacting to life and start creating life. You stop letting external factors determine your internal state and start letting your internal state determine your external results. Champions understand that they are not products of their circumstances. They are products of their decisions. They are not victims of their environment. They are creators of their environment. They are not slaves to their emotions. They are masters of their emotions. They are not prisoners of their past. They are architects of their future. The third psychological principle is abundance thinking. While average people operate from scarcity, champions operate from abundance. While average people see limited opportunities, champions see unlimited possibilities. While average people compete for scraps, champions create new markets. While average people think small, champions think massive. Abundance thinking isn't about being unrealistic. It's about being expansive. It's about seeing opportunities where others see obstacles. It's about creating value where others see scarcity. It's about thinking bigger when others think smaller. It's about playing to win when others play not to lose. Champions don't just think they can have more. They think they can create more. They don't just want a bigger slice of the pie. They want to create a bigger pie. They don't just compete in existing markets. They create new markets. They don't just follow trends. They set trends. But here's what's even more important. Champions don't just think abundantly about external resources. They think abundantly about their own capabilities. They don't just believe they can do more. They believe they can become more. They don't just want to achieve more, they want to contribute more. The fourth psychological principle is systems thinking. Champions don't just focus on goals. They focus on systems. They don't just think about outcomes. They think about processes. They don't just want results. They want to create the systems that produce results automatically. Systems thinking means you stop relying on motivation and start relying on mechanisms. You stop depending on willpower and start depending on workflows. You stop hoping for success and start engineering success. You stop leaving things to chance and start creating things by design. Champions understand that goals are just the destination. Systems are the vehicle that gets you there. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. If you want to achieve champion-level results, you need to create champion-level systems. The fifth psychological principle is growth thinking. Champions don't just want to win once. They want to keep winning. They don't just want to achieve a goal. They want to keep achieving bigger goals. They don't just want to be successful. They want to be increasingly successful. Growth thinking means you're never satisfied with your current level. You're always pushing to the next level. You're never content with your current capabilities. You're always developing new capabilities. You're never finished learning. You're always finding new ways to improve. Champions understand that success is not a destination. It's a journey. It's not something you achieve once and then maintain. It's something you create continuously. It's not about getting to the top. It's about staying on top by continuing to climb. But here's the brutal truth about your current psychology. You're still thinking like average people think. You're still operating from scarcity instead of abundance. You're still focused on problems instead of solutions. You're still thinking about what you can't do instead of what you can do. The gap between your current psychology and champion psychology is enormous. But here's what champions understand that you don't. Psychology is not fixed. It's flexible. It's not permanent. It's programmable. It's not something you're born with. It's something you build. Champions have deliberately programmed their psychology for success. They've systematically eliminated limiting beliefs and installed empowering beliefs. They've consciously chosen their mental patterns instead of unconsciously accepting them. They've taken control of their psychology instead of letting their psychology control them. You want to know the real secret to champion psychology? It's not about being positive all the time. It's about being purposeful all the time. It's not about feeling good all the time. It's about thinking clearly all the time. It's not about being happy all the time. It's about being focused all the time. Champions have learned to separate their emotional state from their mental state. They can feel frustrated and still think clearly. They can experience setbacks and still maintain their focus. They can face uncertainty and still make decisive decisions. They can encounter obstacles and still see opportunities. This is the psychology of champions. It's not about being superhuman. It's about being systematically human. It's about understanding how your mind works and programming it to work for you instead of against you. It's about taking control of your psychology instead of letting your psychology control you. But understanding champion psychology is just the beginning. You need to start installing these psychological principles in your own mind. You need to start rewiring your brain for success instead of accepting its current wiring for survival. You need to start thinking like a champion instead of just understanding how champions think. Most people will hear about these psychological principles and do nothing with them. They'll think they're interesting, but never apply them. They'll understand them intellectually, but never integrate them emotionally. They'll know about them theoretically, but never use them practically. You're different. You're not just here to learn about champion psychology. You're here to develop champion psychology. You're not just here to understand how champions think. You're here to start thinking like a champion. You're not just here to know these principles. You're here to live these principles. But rewiring your psychology isn't easy. It requires consistent effort, deliberate practice, and relentless commitment. It requires you to examine your current beliefs, challenge your limiting thoughts, and replace your destructive patterns with constructive ones. Chapter 3. Destroying Limiting Beliefs. Your biggest enemy isn't your competition. It's not the economy. It's not your circumstances. Your biggest enemy is the voice in your head that tells you why you can't succeed. That voice has been programmed by years of conditioning, and it's keeping you trapped in a mental prison you don't even realize you're in. Every single day you wake up and that voice starts talking. It tells you why today won't be different from yesterday. It reminds you of your past failures. It whispers about all the reasons you should play it safe. It convinces you that dreaming big is unrealistic and that settling for less is practical. This voice isn't protecting you. It's imprisoning you. It's not keeping you safe. It's keeping you small. It's not being realistic. It's being destructive. And until you learn to silence that voice and replace it with the voice of a champion, you'll never achieve champion-level results. Limiting beliefs are like invisible chains. You can't see them, but they control every move you make. They determine what you think is possible, what you think you deserve, and what you think you're capable of. They operate below the level of conscious awareness, but they influence every decision you make. The first step in destroying limiting beliefs is recognizing them. Most people don't even know they have limiting beliefs. They think their thoughts are facts instead of recognizing them as programmed patterns. They think their beliefs are reality instead of understanding that their beliefs create their reality. Here are the most common limiting beliefs that keep people trapped in mediocrity. I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough experience. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I'm too old. I'm too young. I don't have the right connections. I don't have the right background. Champions don't have different circumstances. They have different beliefs about their circumstances. Champions don't have more resources. They have more resourcefulness. Champions don't have fewer obstacles. They have more determination to overcome obstacles. Champions don't have different problems. They have different responses to problems. The second step in destroying limiting beliefs is challenging them. You need to examine every belief you hold and ask yourself, is this belief helping me succeed or helping me fail? If it's not serving your success, you need to eliminate it. If it's not moving you forward, you need to replace it. Champions don't just challenge their limiting beliefs, they obliterate them. They don't just question their negative thoughts, they destroy them. They don't just doubt their doubts, they annihilate them. They understand that limiting beliefs are not facts. They're just thoughts that have been repeated so often they feel like facts. The third step in destroying limiting beliefs is replacing them with empowering beliefs. You can't just remove negative programming. You need to install positive programming. You can't just stop thinking like a loser. You need to start thinking like a winner. You can't just eliminate limiting beliefs. You need to create empowering beliefs. Champions have systematically installed empowering beliefs that support their success. Instead of, I'm not smart enough, they believe, I can learn anything I need to learn. Instead of, I don't have enough experience, they believe, I can gain experience by taking action. Instead of, I don't have enough money, they believe, I can create the money I need. But here's what most people don't understand about beliefs. They're not just thoughts. They're commands to your subconscious mind. They're not just ideas. They're instructions to your nervous system. They're not just opinions. They're orders to your behavior. What you believe becomes what you achieve. Champions understand that beliefs are self-fulfilling prophecies. If you believe you can succeed, you'll find ways to succeed. If you believe you'll fail, you'll find ways to fail. If you believe you're capable, you'll act capable. If you believe you're limited, you'll act limited. Your beliefs become your reality. The fourth step in destroying limiting beliefs is finding evidence for your new empowering beliefs. Your mind needs proof that your new beliefs are true. You need to find examples of people who have succeeded, despite having the same limitations you think you have. You need to find evidence that your new beliefs are possible. Champions don't just hope their empowering beliefs are true. They find proof that they're true. They don't just think they can succeed. They find evidence that success is possible. They don't just believe they can overcome obstacles. They find examples of people who have overcome similar obstacles. The fifth step in destroying limiting beliefs is taking action that aligns with your empowering beliefs. Beliefs without action are just wishful thinking. Empowering thoughts without empowering actions are just fantasies. You need to act as if your empowering beliefs are already true. Champions don't just think like winners. They act like winners. They don't just believe they can succeed. They behave like successful people. They don't just have empowering beliefs. They have empowering behaviors that reinforce their empowering beliefs. But here's the brutal truth about your current belief system. It's filled with limitations that you've accepted as facts. You've convinced yourself that your circumstances are permanent, that your limitations are unchangeable, and that your current level is your maximum potential. You're wrong. The beliefs that are keeping you trapped are not facts. They're just thoughts that have been repeated so often they feel like facts. They're not reality. They're just interpretations of reality that you've accepted without question. They're not truth. They're just stories you've told yourself about why you can't succeed. Champions have the same access to success that you do. They have the same opportunities, the same resources, and the same potential. The difference is, They have different beliefs about what's possible. They have different stories about what they can achieve. They have different interpretations of what their circumstances mean. You want to know the real secret to destroying limiting beliefs? It's not about positive thinking. It's about truthful thinking. It's about recognizing that your limiting beliefs are lies and replacing them with empowering truths. It's about understanding that your current beliefs are not facts about reality. They're just facts about your current programming. Champions don't just think positively. They think accurately. They don't just believe good things about themselves. They believe true things about their potential. They don't just hope for the best. They expect the best because they know they can create the best. The process of destroying limiting beliefs is not easy. It requires you to examine thoughts you've never questioned, challenge beliefs you've never doubted, and replace patterns you've never recognized. It requires you to be brutally honest about the stories you've been telling yourself about why you can't succeed. But here's what happens when you destroy your limiting beliefs. You stop seeing obstacles and start seeing opportunities. You stop focusing on problems and start focusing on solutions. You stop making excuses and start making progress. You stop limiting yourself and start liberating yourself. Champions understand that the only limits that matter are the ones you accept. The only barriers that stop you are the ones you believe in. The only obstacles that defeat you are the ones you surrender to. The only failure that destroys you is the failure to challenge your own limiting beliefs. Most people will hear about limiting beliefs and do nothing to eliminate them. They'll recognize them intellectually, but never address them emotionally. They'll understand they have them, but never do the work to remove them. They'll know they're limiting, but never take action to change them. You're different. You're not just here to learn about limiting beliefs. You're here to destroy them. You're not just here to understand how they work. You're here to eliminate them from your life. You're not just here to recognize them. You're here to replace them with empowering beliefs that support your success. But destroying limiting beliefs is just the beginning. Once you've eliminated the mental barriers that have been holding you back, you need to build the mental strength to move forward. You need to develop the confidence to pursue your goals without hesitation or doubt. Chapter 4. Building unshakable confidence. Confidence isn't something you have. It's something you build. It's not a personality trait you're born with. It's a skill you develop through deliberate practice. It's not about feeling good about yourself all the time. It's about trusting yourself to handle whatever comes your way. Most people think confidence comes from external validation. They think it comes from other people telling them they're good enough, smart enough, or capable enough. They think it comes from achievements, accomplishments, or recognition. But this kind of confidence is fragile because it depends on factors outside your control. Champions build confidence from the inside out. They don't wait for external validation to feel confident. They create internal validation through their actions, their preparation, and their commitment to excellence. They don't need other people to tell them they're capable. They prove it to themselves through their behavior. The first component of unshakable confidence is self-awareness. You need to know your strengths, your weaknesses, your values, and your capabilities. You need to understand what you're good at, what you need to improve, and what you stand for. You need to have a clear picture of who you are and who you're becoming. Champions don't just know their strengths. They leverage their strengths. They don't just recognize their weaknesses. They work to eliminate their weaknesses. They don't just understand their values. They live their values. They don't just know who they are. They become who they want to be. Self-awareness isn't about being self-critical. It's about being self-honest. It's not about focusing on your flaws. It's about understanding your potential. It's not about judging yourself harshly. It's about assessing yourself accurately so you can improve yourself systematically. The second component of unshakable confidence is self-acceptance. You need to accept yourself as you are while working to become who you want to be. You need to embrace your current level while striving for the next level. You need to love yourself enough to demand more from yourself. Champions don't wait until they're perfect to feel confident. They feel confident because they're committed to continuous improvement. They don't wait until they have all the answers to take action. They take action because they know they can figure out the answers along the way. Self-acceptance isn't about being complacent. It's about being compassionate with yourself while maintaining high standards. It's about understanding that you're a work in progress while believing in your ability to progress. It's about accepting where you are while refusing to stay there. The third component of unshakable confidence is self-reliance. You need to develop the ability to depend on yourself, to trust your judgment, and to make decisions without constantly seeking approval from others. You need to become your own source of validation, motivation, and direction. Champions don't need permission to pursue their goals. They give themselves permission. They don't need approval to take action. They approve of their own actions. They don't need validation to feel worthy. They validate themselves through their efforts and their commitment to excellence. Self-reliance isn't about being isolated. It's about being independent. It's not about rejecting help from others. It's about not depending on others for your sense of self-worth. It's not about being arrogant. It's about being autonomous. The fourth component of unshakable confidence is competence. You need to develop the skills, knowledge, and abilities that allow you to perform at a high level. You need to become so good at what you do that your confidence is based on your capability, not just your feelings. Champions don't just feel confident. They are confident because they've earned the right to be confident through their preparation, their practice, and their performance. They don't just believe in themselves. They have evidence that their belief is justified. Competence isn't about being perfect. It's about being prepared. It's not about knowing everything. It's about knowing enough to get started and learning the rest along the way. It's not about being the best. It's about being your best. The fifth component of unshakable confidence is courage. You need to develop the ability to act despite fear, to move forward despite uncertainty, and to take risks despite the possibility of failure. You need to become comfortable with discomfort and confident in your ability to handle whatever comes your way. Champions don't wait until they feel fearless to take action. They take action despite feeling fearful. They don't wait until they have certainty to move forward. They move forward despite uncertainty. They don't wait until success is guaranteed to take risks. They take risks because they know that's where the greatest rewards are. Courage isn't about being reckless. It's about being brave. It's not about ignoring risks. It's about taking calculated risks. It's not about being stupid. It's about being strategic while maintaining the willingness to act despite imperfect information. But here's the brutal truth about your current confidence level. It's not where it needs to be. You're still looking for external validation instead of creating internal validation. You're still waiting for permission instead of giving yourself permission. You're still seeking approval instead of trusting your own judgment. Real confidence isn't about feeling good about yourself all the time. It's about trusting yourself to handle whatever comes your way. It's not about being positive all the time. It's about being prepared all the time. It's not about never feeling doubt. It's about acting despite doubt. Champions have trained themselves to act confidently even when they don't feel confident. They understand that confidence is not a prerequisite for action. It's a result of action. They don't wait until they feel confident to act. They act and build confidence through their actions. You want to know the real secret to unshakable confidence? It's not about never failing. It's about failing forward. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about learning from your mistakes. It's not about being perfect. It's about being persistent. Champions have failed more times than average people have tried. They've made more mistakes than average people have attempts. They've faced more rejection than average people have faced challenges. But they've built confidence through their willingness to fail, to make mistakes, and to face rejection. The process of building unshakable confidence is not comfortable. It requires you to push beyond your comfort zone, to take risks you've never taken, and to face fears you've been avoiding. It requires you to prove to yourself that you can handle more than you think you can. But here's what happens when you build unshakable confidence. You stop hesitating and start acting. You stop doubting and start deciding. You stop waiting and start creating. You stop asking for permission and start taking action. You stop seeking validation and start validating yourself. Champions understand that confidence is not a feeling. It's a decision. It's the decision to trust yourself, to bet on yourself, and to act despite uncertainty. It's the decision to believe in your ability to figure things out, to overcome obstacles, and to create the results you want. Most people will hear about confidence and wait for it to appear magically. They'll hope that someday they'll wake up feeling confident. They'll wish for confidence, but never do the work to build it. They'll want confidence, but never take the actions that create it. You're different. You're not just here to learn about confidence. You're here to build it. You're not just here to understand how it works. You're here to develop it through deliberate practice. You're not just here to wish for it. You're here to create it through your actions. But building confidence is just the foundation. Once you have unshakable confidence in your abilities, you need to develop the discipline to use those abilities consistently. You need to create the systems and habits that allow you to perform at your peak, regardless of how you feel. Chapter 5. The Discipline Code. Motivation is for amateurs. Champions run on discipline. While average people wait to feel motivated before taking action, champions take action whether they feel motivated or not. While average people rely on emotion to fuel their efforts, champions rely on systems to sustain their performance. Here's the brutal truth about motivation. It's unreliable. It comes and goes. It's strong when you're excited and weak when you're tired. It's present when things are going well and absent when things get difficult. If you depend on motivation to achieve your goals, you'll fail when motivation fails you. Champions have discovered something that average people never learn. Discipline is freedom. It's the freedom to do what you know you should do, regardless of how you feel. It's the freedom to pursue your goals even when you don't feel like it. It's the freedom to create the life you want instead of accepting the life you have. The first principle of the Discipline Code is that discipline is a decision, not a feeling. You don't have to feel disciplined to act disciplined. You don't have to want to do something to do it. You just have to decide to do it and then do it regardless of how you feel about it. Champions understand that feelings are temporary, but actions are permanent. Emotions come and go, but results remain. How you feel in the moment is less important than what you do in the moment. Your feelings don't determine your actions. Your decisions determine your actions. The second principle of the Discipline Code is that discipline is a skill that can be developed. You're not born disciplined or undisciplined. You become disciplined through practice. You build discipline by doing disciplined things. You strengthen discipline by exercising discipline. Champions treat discipline like a muscle. They know that the more they use it, the stronger it becomes. They deliberately put themselves in situations that require discipline because they know that's how discipline grows. They don't avoid difficult tasks. They seek them out because they know difficulty builds strength. The third principle of the Discipline Code is that discipline is about doing what you hate when you hate it. It's not about doing what you love. Anyone can do what they love. Discipline is about doing what you need to do even when you don't want to do it. Champions don't just do what they enjoy. They do what they need to do to achieve their goals. They don't just work when they feel like it. They work especially when they don't feel like it. They don't just perform when they're inspired. They perform when they're tired, frustrated, and unmotivated. The fourth principle of the Discipline Code is that discipline creates momentum. Every disciplined action makes the next disciplined action easier. Every time you do what you know you should do, you strengthen your ability to do what you know you should do in the future. Champions understand that discipline is compound. It builds on itself. It creates a positive cycle where disciplined actions lead to better results, which lead to more motivation, which leads to more disciplined actions. They don't just rely on discipline. They create discipline systems that reinforce themselves. The fifth principle of the discipline code is that discipline is about systems, not goals. Goals are what you want to achieve. Systems are how you achieve them. Champions don't just focus on what they want to accomplish. They focus on the daily actions that will accomplish it. Champions understand that you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. If you want to achieve champion-level results, you need to create champion-level systems. You need to systematize your success so it becomes automatic. But here's the brutal truth about your current discipline level. It's pathetic compared to what champions demand of themselves. You're still doing what you feel like doing instead of what you need to do. You're still letting your emotions control your actions instead of letting your decisions control your actions. Champions have systems for everything. They have systems for how they start their day, how they approach their work, how they handle setbacks, and how they end their day. They don't leave their performance to chance. They engineer their performance through systematic discipline. The discipline code isn't about being rigid. It's about being reliable. It's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about getting back on track quickly when you do make mistakes. Champions understand that discipline is not about punishment. It's about empowerment. It's not about restriction. It's about liberation. It's not about doing what you have to do. It's about doing what you choose to do to create the life you want. You want to know the real secret to developing discipline? It's not about willpower. It's about systems. It's not about being strong all the time. It's about creating structures that make strength easier and weakness harder. It's not about motivation. It's about automation. Champions have automated their success through disciplined systems. They don't rely on willpower to eat right. They create systems that make healthy eating automatic. They don't depend on motivation to exercise. They create systems that make exercise inevitable. They don't wait for inspiration to work. They create systems that make work systematic. The process of developing discipline is not comfortable. It requires you to do things you don't want to do, to maintain standards you don't feel like maintaining, and to persist when you want to quit. It requires you to choose long-term success over short-term comfort. But here's what happens when you develop true discipline. You stop being a victim of your emotions and start being the master of your actions. You stop letting how you feel determine what you do and start letting what you do determine how you feel. You stop being controlled by circumstances and start controlling your circumstances. Champions understand that discipline is the bridge between goals and achievement. It's the difference between wanting something and getting something. It's the gap between dreaming and doing. It's the connection between intention and results. Most people will hear about discipline and try to rely on willpower to develop it. They'll attempt to force themselves to be disciplined through sheer mental effort. They'll try to muscle their way to better habits. But willpower is limited, and willpower depletes. You're different. You're not just here to learn about discipline. You're here to systematize it. You're not just here to understand how it works. You're here to create systems that make discipline automatic. You're not just here to want more discipline. You're here to engineer more discipline. But discipline without mental toughness is just compliance. You need to develop the mental strength to maintain your discipline even when facing adversity, setbacks, and challenges. You need to build the mental resilience that allows you to persist when others quit. Chapter 6. Mental Toughness Training. Mental toughness isn't born, it's forged through fire. While average people avoid pain, champions seek it out because they know pain is the price of power. While average people run from difficulty, champions run toward it because they understand that difficulty is the gateway to growth. While average people make excuses when things get hard, champions get harder when things get hard. Here's the brutal truth about your current mental state. You haven't been truly tested yet. You think you've faced adversity, but you've only faced inconvenience. You think you've overcome obstacles, but you've only navigated minor setbacks. You think you're mentally tough, but you haven't experienced the kind of pressure that reveals who you really are. Champions understand something that will shock you. Mental toughness is not about being emotionless. It's about feeling everything and functioning anyway. It's not about never experiencing fear. It's about acting despite fear. It's not about avoiding pain. It's about using pain as fuel for your fire. The first principle of mental toughness training is stress inoculation. You need to deliberately expose yourself to stress so you can build immunity to pressure. You need to put yourself in uncomfortable situations so comfort becomes your natural state. You need to practice performing under pressure so pressure becomes your performance enhancer. Champions don't wait for pressure to find them. They create pressure for themselves. They don't avoid stressful situations. They seek them out. They don't try to eliminate stress from their lives. They try to harness stress as a tool for improvement. They understand that stress is not the enemy. Unmanaged stress is the enemy. Stress inoculation means you deliberately make things harder for yourself so real challenges feel easier. You practice in conditions that are more difficult than actual performance conditions. You train at a higher intensity than you'll need to compete. You prepare for worse scenarios than you're likely to face. The second principle of mental toughness training is adversity addiction. You need to develop a craving for challenges, an appetite for obstacles, and a hunger for hardship. You need to become the kind of person who gets excited when things get difficult, because you know that's where you separate yourself from everyone else. Champions are addicted to adversity because they know adversity reveals character. Easy times reveal nothing. Anyone can perform when everything is going well. Champions prove themselves when everything is going wrong. They don't just survive adversity. They thrive in adversity. Adversity addiction doesn't mean you enjoy suffering. It means you appreciate the growth that comes from suffering. It doesn't mean you seek pain for its own sake. It means you seek the strength that pain creates. It doesn't mean you love problems. It means you love the solutions that problems force you to create. The third principle of mental toughness training is failure immunity. You need to fail so often that failure becomes irrelevant. You need to get rejected so frequently that rejection becomes meaningless. You need to experience setbacks so regularly that setbacks become stepping stones. Champions have failed. More than average people have tried. They've been rejected. More than average people have applied. They've faced more setbacks than average people have faced challenges. But they've developed immunity to the emotional impact of failure because they understand that failure is education, not elimination. Failure immunity means you stop personalizing failure and start leveraging failure. You stop seeing failure as a reflection of your worth and start seeing it as feedback for your approach. You stop letting failure slow you down and start letting failure speed you up by teaching you what doesn't work. The fourth principle of mental toughness training is pain tolerance. You need to increase your capacity to handle discomfort, to endure difficulty, and to persist through problems. You need to expand your pain threshold so that what used to stop you now only slows you down. Champions have trained themselves to function at high levels despite experiencing discomfort. They can think clearly when they're tired. They can perform effectively when they're stressed. They can make good decisions when they're under pressure. They can maintain their standards when they're facing adversity. Pain tolerance doesn't mean you ignore pain. It means you interpret pain differently. Instead of seeing pain as a signal to stop, you see it as a signal to focus. Instead of interpreting discomfort as a reason to quit, you interpret it as a reason to push harder. Instead of viewing difficulty as punishment, you view it as preparation. The fifth principle of mental toughness training is recovery mastery. You need to develop the ability to bounce back quickly from setbacks, to recover rapidly from failures, and to restart immediately after stops. You need to minimize the time between being knocked down and getting back up. Champions don't just recover from setbacks, they recover faster than their competition. They don't just bounce back from failures, they bounce back stronger than before. They don't just restart after stops, they restart with more momentum than they had originally. Recovery mastery means you develop systems for processing setbacks quickly and getting back to peak performance immediately. You don't waste time feeling sorry for yourself. You don't spend energy blaming others. You don't lose momentum dwelling on what went wrong. You focus all your energy on what to do next. But here's the brutal truth about your mental toughness. You're still avoiding the very experiences that would make you mentally tougher. You're still choosing comfort over growth. You're still running from the challenges that would forge your character. You're still protecting yourself from the pain that would make you powerful. Champions deliberately put themselves through mental toughness training because they know that mental weakness is the only thing that can stop them. They know that external obstacles are nothing compared to internal obstacles. They know that the competition can't defeat them if they don't defeat themselves. Mental toughness training is not about becoming a machine. It's about becoming anti-fragile. It's not about feeling nothing. It's about functioning despite feeling everything. It's not about being invulnerable. It's about being resilient. It's not about never being affected by adversity. It's about being strengthened by adversity. You want to know the real secret to mental toughness? It's not about being tough all the time. It's about being tough when it matters most. It's not about never feeling weak. It's about acting strong despite feeling weak. It's not about avoiding difficult moments. It's about rising to difficult moments. Champions understand that mental toughness is like physical fitness. If you don't use it, you lose it. If you don't challenge it, it doesn't grow. If you don't test it, it doesn't strengthen. Mental toughness requires constant training, deliberate practice, and progressive overload. The process of developing mental toughness is brutal. It requires you to face your fears, confront your weaknesses, and push through your limits. It requires you to do things that scare you, to endure things that hurt you, and to persist through things that exhaust you. But here's what happens when you develop true mental toughness. You become unbreakable, not because nothing can hurt you, but because you can function despite being hurt. Not because you never feel pressure, but because pressure brings out your best performance. Not because you never face adversity, but because adversity reveals your strength. Champions understand that mental toughness is not just about individual performance. It's about leadership under pressure. It's about inspiring others when everyone is struggling. It's about being the rock that others can lean on when everything is falling apart. Most people will hear about mental toughness training and continue avoiding the very experiences that would make them tougher. They'll talk about wanting to be mentally strong while choosing mentally weak behaviors. They'll admire mental toughness in others while refusing to develop it in themselves. You're different. You're not just here to learn about mental toughness. You're here to develop it. You're not just here to understand how it works. You're here to build it through deliberate exposure to difficulty. You're not just here to want it. You're here to earn it. But mental toughness without focus is just endurance. You need to develop the ability to concentrate your mental energy like a laser beam, to eliminate distractions, and to maintain peak attention even under pressure. Chapter 7. The Focus Domination Method. In a world of distractions, focus is your superpower. While everyone else is scattered, fragmented, and pulled in 1,000 different directions, champions have developed the ability to concentrate their mental energy like a weapon. They don't just pay attention, they command attention. They don't just focus, they dominate focus. Here's the shocking truth about your current focus level. It's pathetic. You think you can focus because you can concentrate for a few minutes at a time. You think you have good attention because you can complete basic tasks. But your focus is amateur level compared to what champions demand of themselves. Champions don't just have better focus. They have different focus. They don't just concentrate harder. They concentrate smarter. They don't just eliminate distractions. They engineer environments that make focus inevitable and distraction impossible. The first component of focus domination is attention architecture. You need to design your environment, your schedule, and your systems to support deep focus instead of enabling scattered attention. You need to create external conditions that make internal focus easier. Champions understand that willpower alone is not enough to maintain focus. They need systems that support focus. They need environments that encourage focus. They need structures that make focus the path of least resistance. They engineer their success by engineering their focus. Attention architecture means you eliminate everything that competes for your attention and amplify everything that supports your attention. You remove distractions from your environment. You batch similar activities to minimize context switching. You create visual cues that remind you of your priorities. The second component of focus domination is priority precision. You need to be absolutely clear about what deserves your focus and what doesn't. You need to develop the ability to distinguish between what's urgent and what's important, between what's busy work and what's breakthrough work. Champions don't just work hard. They work on the right things. They don't just focus intensely. They focus on high-impact activities. They don't just eliminate distractions. They eliminate low-value activities that masquerade as important work. Priority precision means you know exactly what you should be focusing on at any given moment. You have clear criteria for what deserves your attention and what doesn't. You can quickly identify the vital few activities that produce the majority of your results. The third component of focus domination is deep work protocols. You need to develop the ability to enter states of profound concentration where you can produce work of exceptional quality and quantity. You need to train your brain to sustain attention for extended periods without fatigue or distraction. Champions don't just work. They enter flow states where they perform at levels that seem superhuman. They don't just concentrate. They achieve cognitive flow where their mental capacity is fully engaged and optimally utilized. They don't just focus. They enter zones of peak performance. Deep work protocols mean you have systematic methods for entering and maintaining states of profound concentration. You know how to prepare your mind for deep work. You know how to sustain deep work for extended periods. You know how to transition between deep work and recovery. The fourth component of focus domination is distraction immunity. You need to develop the ability to maintain focus despite external interruptions, internal impulses, and environmental chaos. You need to become immune to the attention hijacking that destroys most people's productivity. Champions have trained their minds to be impervious to distraction. They can maintain focus in noisy environments. They can concentrate despite interruptions. They can sustain attention even when their phones are buzzing, their emails are piling up, and their environment is chaotic. Distraction immunity means you don't just resist distractions. You become immune to them. You don't just avoid interruptions. You become uninterruptible. You don't just manage your attention. You protect your attention like a fortress protects its treasure. The fifth component of focus domination is attention restoration. You need to develop the ability to recover your mental energy quickly so you can return to peak focus repeatedly throughout the day. You need to understand how to rest your mind so you can work your mind at maximum capacity. Champions don't just focus intensely. They focus sustainably. They don't just work hard. They work smart by alternating between intense focus and strategic recovery. They don't just push their minds to the limit. They know how to restore their minds to full capacity. Attention restoration means you have systematic methods for recovering your mental energy. You know how to rest without becoming lazy. You know how to recharge without losing momentum. You know how to restore your focus so you can dominate your next work session. But here's the brutal truth about your current focus abilities. You're still letting your environment control your attention instead of controlling your environment to support your attention. You're still reacting to distractions instead of proactively eliminating them. You're still working scattered instead of working concentrated. Champions have turned focus into a competitive advantage. While their competition is distracted, they're concentrated. While others are scattered, they're focused. While everyone else is doing busy work, they're doing breakthrough work. Focus is their secret weapon. The focus domination method is not about working more hours. It's about working better hours. It's not about being busy all the time. It's about being productive when it matters. It's not about never taking breaks. It's about taking strategic breaks that enhance rather than diminish your focus. You want to know the real secret to dominating focus. It's not about perfect concentration. It's about practical concentration. It's not about never getting distracted. It's about returning to focus quickly when you do get distracted. It's not about superhuman attention. It's about systematic attention. Champions understand that focus is a skill that can be trained, developed, and strengthened through deliberate practice. They don't just hope for better focus. They train for better focus. They don't just wish they could concentrate better. They practice concentrating better. The process of developing focus domination is challenging because it requires you to go against the grain of modern society. Everything in your environment is designed to fragment your attention, scatter your focus, and hijack your concentration. Developing focus domination is swimming upstream. But here's what happens when you master focus domination. You accomplish in hours what others accomplish in days. You produce work of exceptional quality, while others produce work of mediocre quality. You make progress on important projects, while others get lost in busy work. Champions understand that focus is not just about individual productivity. It's about creating work that matters. It's about producing results that make a difference. It's about using your limited attention to create unlimited value. Most people will hear about focus domination and continue living with scattered attention. They'll complain about being distracted while continuing to choose distracting behaviors. They'll wish they could focus better while refusing to engineer environments that support focus. You're different. You're not just here to learn about focus. You're here to dominate it. You're not just here to understand how concentration works. You're here to develop concentration that's so powerful, it becomes your competitive advantage. You're not just here to want better focus. You're here to create better focus. But focus without pressure. Performance is just concentration in comfortable conditions. You need to develop the ability to maintain peak focus even when the stakes are high, the pressure is intense, and everything is on the line. Chapter 8. Pressure Performance Mindset. Champions don't crumble under pressure. They thrive in it. While average people fold when the stakes get high, champions rise to meet the moment. While others get nervous when everything is on the line, champions get energized. While most people avoid high-pressure situations, champions seek them out because they know that's where legends are made. Here's the shocking reality about pressure. It doesn't create character. It reveals character. It doesn't make you weak or strong. It shows you what you already are. Pressure is a truth detector, and most people don't like what the truth reveals about their mental strength. You think you perform well under pressure? You think you can handle high-stakes situations? You think you're ready for the big moments? Let me tell you something that's going to humble you. You haven't experienced real pressure yet. You've experienced stress, but stress is not pressure. Pressure is when everything you've worked for is on the line, and one decision determines whether you succeed or fail. Champions have a completely different relationship with pressure. They don't see pressure as a burden. They see it as a privilege. They don't view high-stakes situations as threats. They view them as opportunities. They don't experience pressure as something that weighs them down. They experience it as something that lifts them up. The first principle of pressure performance is pressure reframing. You need to change your interpretation of what pressure means. Instead of seeing pressure as something negative, you need to see it as something positive. Instead of viewing pressure as a threat, you need to view it as an opportunity. Champions understand that pressure is energy, and energy can be channeled. They don't try to eliminate pressure. They try to harness pressure. They don't run from high-stakes situations. They run toward them because they know that's where they can separate themselves from everyone else. Pressure reframing means you stop telling yourself that pressure is bad and start telling yourself that pressure is good. You stop interpreting nervous energy as a sign of weakness and start interpreting it as a sign of importance. You stop seeing high-stakes situations as problems and start seeing them as platforms for greatness. The second principle of pressure performance is physiological mastery. You need to learn how to control your body's response to pressure so your physical state supports your mental performance instead of sabotaging it. You need to harness your nervous system as a performance enhancer instead of a performance inhibitor. Champions have learned to use their physiological responses to pressure as fuel for their performance. They don't fight their adrenaline. They channel it. They don't resist their elevated heart rate. They use it. They don't suppress their nervous energy. They direct it toward peak performance. Physiological mastery means you know how to breathe under pressure, how to relax under tension, and how to maintain physical control when your emotions are intense. You understand how to use your body to support your mind when your mind is under attack from pressure. The third principle of pressure performance is mental rehearsal. You need to practice performing under pressure in your mind before you have to perform under pressure in reality. You need to visualize success in high-stakes situations so your brain has a blueprint for peak performance when those situations arise. Champions don't just practice their skills. They practice their mental responses to pressure. They don't just rehearse their techniques. They rehearse their thoughts under stress. They don't just prepare their bodies for performance. They prepare their minds for pressure. Mental rehearsal means you systematically imagine yourself performing at your best in high-pressure situations. You visualize yourself staying calm when others panic. You see yourself making good decisions when others make poor decisions. You rehearse success, so success becomes familiar. The fourth principle of pressure performance is present moment awareness. You need to develop the ability to stay completely focused on what's happening right now instead of getting lost in thoughts about what might happen in the future or what happened in the past. Champions understand that pressure only exists when you're thinking about the future consequences of your current performance. If you stay completely present, pressure disappears because pressure is just anxiety about future outcomes. Champions eliminate pressure by eliminating future-focused thinking during performance. Present moment awareness means you train your mind to focus exclusively on the task at hand. You don't think about winning or losing. You think about executing. You don't focus on the stakes. You focus on the steps. You don't concentrate on the outcome. You concentrate on the process. The fifth principle of pressure performance is clutch identity. You need to develop an identity as someone who performs their best when it matters most. You need to see yourself as someone who rises to big moments instead of shrinking from them. You need to become the kind of person who gets better under pressure instead of worse. Champions don't just perform well under pressure. They expect to perform well under pressure. They don't hope they'll rise to the occasion. They know they'll rise to the occasion because that's who they are. They've built an identity around being clutch performers. Clutch identity means you tell yourself stories about being someone who thrives under pressure. You collect evidence of times when you performed well in high-stakes situations. You reinforce your belief that pressure brings out your best instead of your worst. You become the person who others count on when everything is on the line. But here's the brutal truth about your current pressure performance. You're not ready for real pressure yet. You've convinced yourself that you perform well under pressure based on low-stakes situations. You've never been truly tested when everything you care about is on the line. Champions seek out high-pressure situations because they know that's where they can prove their superiority. They don't avoid big moments. They create big moments. They don't run from high-stakes decisions. They engineer high-stakes decisions because they know that's where they can separate themselves from their competition. The pressure performance mindset is not about being fearless. It's about being focused despite fear. It's not about never feeling nervous. It's about performing brilliantly despite feeling nervous. It's not about eliminating pressure. It's about leveraging pressure as a performance enhancer. You want to know the real secret to pressure performance. It's not about being calm under pressure. It's about being effective under pressure. It's not about feeling comfortable in high-stakes situations. It's about functioning optimally in high-stakes situations. It's not about never experiencing pressure. It's about transforming pressure into power. Champions understand that pressure is a privilege that comes with pursuing meaningful goals. If there's no pressure, there's no importance. If there are no stakes, there's no significance. If there's no risk, there's no reward. Pressure is the price of playing at the highest levels. The process of developing pressure performance is uncomfortable because it requires you to deliberately put yourself in high-stakes situations where failure is possible and visible. It requires you to risk embarrassment, disappointment, and defeat in order to build the skills to handle pressure. But here's what happens when you master pressure performance. You become someone that others rely on when everything is on the line. You become the person who steps up when others step back. You become the clutch performer who delivers when it matters most. Champions understand that pressure performance is not just about individual achievement. It's about leadership in critical moments. It's about inspiring others when everyone is struggling. It's about being the steady presence that others can count on when the world is chaotic. Most people will hear about pressure performance and continue avoiding high-stakes situations. They'll admire clutch performers from a distance while refusing to put themselves in positions where clutch performance is required. They'll want to be great under pressure while avoiding pressure altogether. You're different. You're not just here to learn about pressure performance. You're here to develop it. You're not just here to understand how champions handle pressure. You're here to become a champion who thrives under pressure. You're not just here to want clutch performance. You're here to become a clutch performer. But pressure performance without relentless pursuit is just peak performance in isolated moments. You need to develop the ability to maintain excellent performance consistently, to persist through extended challenges, and to never quit pursuing your goals, regardless of obstacles. Chapter 9. The Relentless Pursuit System. Champions don't stop when they're tired. They stop when they're done. While average people quit when things get difficult, champions get more determined. While others give up when progress slows, champions double down on their efforts. While most people stop pursuing their goals when obstacles appear, champions pursue their goals even more aggressively because they know obstacles are just speed bumps on the highway to success. Here's the brutal truth about your current persistence level. It's laughable compared to what real champions demand of themselves. You think you're persistent because you don't give up immediately. You think you have determination because you try multiple times before quitting. But your persistence is amateur level compared to the relentless pursuit that champions bring to everything they do. Champions don't just persist. They pursue relentlessly. They don't just try again when they fail. They try differently when they fail. They don't just continue when things get hard. They accelerate when things get hard because they know that's when their competition starts dropping out. The first component of relentless pursuit is outcome obsession. You need to become so focused on achieving your goals that everything else becomes secondary. You need to develop tunnel vision for your objectives and peripheral blindness to your obstacles. You need to want your goals more than you want comfort, more than you want approval, and more than you want anything else. Champions are obsessed with outcomes in a way that average people can't understand. They think about their goals constantly. They dream about their goals nightly. They structure their entire lives around achieving their goals. Their goals are not something they pursue in their spare time. Their goals are their full-time obsession. Outcome obsession doesn't mean you ignore the process. It means you're so committed to the outcome that you'll do whatever process is required to achieve it. It doesn't mean you're impatient with progress. It means you're impatient with excuses. It doesn't mean you rush the journey. It means you refuse to quit the journey. The second component of relentless pursuit is failure leverage. You need to use every failure as fuel for your fire instead of allowing failures to extinguish your flame. You need to transform every setback into a setup for a comeback. You need to make every defeat a motivation for victory. Champions don't just recover from failures. They use failures as accelerants for their success. They don't just bounce back from setbacks. They bounce forward from setbacks. They don't just survive defeats. They study defeats to make sure they never happen again. Failure leverage means you extract maximum learning from every failure and convert that learning into improved performance. You don't just experience failure. You mine failure for insights. You don't just endure setbacks. You engineer comebacks. You don't just face defeat. You use defeat as education for eventual victory. The third component of relentless pursuit is momentum multiplication. You need to turn small wins into bigger wins, minor progress into major progress, and tiny steps into giant leaps. You need to understand how to build momentum and how to sustain momentum even when external conditions change. Champions understand that momentum is everything. They know that objects in motion stay in motion, and objects at rest stay at rest. They focus on creating momentum when they don't have it, and maintaining momentum when they do have it. They understand that momentum makes everything easier. Momentum multiplication means you celebrate small wins to create emotional energy for bigger wins. You stack successes to build confidence for larger challenges. You use current progress as motivation for future progress. You turn every forward movement into fuel for more forward movement. The fourth component of relentless pursuit is obstacle transformation. You need to develop the ability to see every obstacle as an opportunity, every barrier as a breakthrough point, and every problem as a stepping stone to your solution. You need to become someone who gets excited when obstacles appear, because you know they're protecting your goals from your competition. Champions don't see obstacles as reasons to quit. They see obstacles as reasons their goals are worth pursuing. They don't view barriers as stop signs. They view them as detour signs. They don't interpret problems as evidence that they should give up. They interpret problems as evidence that they're on the right path. Obstacle transformation means you reframe every difficulty as a strengthening exercise. You interpret every challenge as a skill-building opportunity. You see every problem as a creativity enhancement tool. You view every barrier as a character development program. The fifth component of relentless pursuit is energy management. You need to understand how to sustain high performance over extended periods without burning out. You need to know how to push hard when pushing is required and how to recover effectively when recovery is needed. Champions don't just work hard, they work smart by managing their energy strategically. They don't just push themselves to the limit. They push themselves to the optimal point for sustained performance. They don't just go all out all the time. They know when to sprint and when to pace. Energy management means you have systems for maintaining peak performance over long periods. You know how to recharge without losing momentum. You understand how to rest without becoming lazy. You can sustain intensity without creating burnout. But here's the shocking truth about your pursuit level. You're still giving up too early, too easily, and too often. You're still letting temporary setbacks become permanent surrenders. You're still choosing short-term comfort over long-term achievement. You're still quitting when you should be doubling down. Champions pursue their goals with a level of intensity that intimidates their competition. They don't just want to achieve their goals. They need to achieve their goals. They don't just hope for success. They require success. They don't just try to win. They refuse to accept anything other than winning. The relentless pursuit system is not about being stubborn. It's about being strategic. It's not about never changing course. It's about never changing destination. It's not about ignoring feedback. It's about refusing to accept defeat as final. You want to know the real secret to relentless pursuit? It's not about never getting tired. It's about continuing despite being tired. It's not about never feeling discouraged. It's about acting despite feeling discouraged. It's not about never wanting to quit. It's about refusing to quit despite wanting to quit. Champions understand that the difference between success and failure is often just persistence. Most people quit right before they would have succeeded. Most people give up just before they would have broken through. Most people stop pursuing their goals just before their goals would have been achieved. The process of developing relentless pursuit is exhausting because it requires you to continue when everything in you wants to stop. It requires you to persist when logic suggests you should quit. It requires you to keep going when everyone around you is telling you to give up. But here's what happens when you master relentless pursuit. You become unstoppable. Not because you never face obstacles, but because you never let obstacles stop you. Not because you never fail, but because you never let failure be final. Not because you never get tired, but because you never let tiredness be an excuse. Champions understand that relentless pursuit is not just about individual achievement. It's about inspiring others to pursue their goals more aggressively. It's about showing others what's possible when you refuse to give up. It's about becoming an example of what human persistence can accomplish. Most people will hear about relentless pursuit and continue giving up when things get difficult. They'll admire persistent people while choosing to quit when faced with obstacles. They'll want to be relentless while choosing to be casual about their goals. You're different. You're not just here to learn about relentless pursuit. You're here to embody it. You're not just here to understand how champions persist. You're here to become a champion who never quits. You're not just here to want relentless pursuit. You're here to become relentlessly persistent. But relentless pursuit without strategic thinking is just hard work in the wrong direction. You need to develop the ability to think ahead, to anticipate challenges, and to position yourself for success before success is obvious to everyone else. Chapter 10. Strategic Thinking Like a Champion. Champions don't just work hard, they think 3 steps ahead. While average people react to what's happening right now, champions are already preparing for what's going to happen next. While others are fighting today's battles, champions are positioning themselves to win tomorrow's wars. While most people are playing checkers, champions are playing chess. Here's the brutal truth about your current thinking level. You're still thinking like an amateur. You're still reacting instead of anticipating. You're still responding to circumstances instead of creating circumstances. You're still playing defense instead of playing offense. Your thinking is tactical when it needs to be strategic. Champions operate on a completely different mental frequency. They don't just see what is, they see what could be. They don't just understand the current situation, they envision multiple future scenarios. They don't just make moves, they make moves that set up their next 10 moves. The first principle of strategic thinking is pattern recognition. You need to develop the ability to see patterns that others miss, to identify trends before they become obvious, and to spot opportunities before they become competitive. You need to train your mind to see the forest while others are focused on individual trees. Champions have developed pattern recognition to an art form. They can look at complex situations and immediately identify the underlying patterns. They can see connections that others miss. They can spot trends in their early stages. They can recognize opportunities when they're still invisible to everyone else. Pattern recognition means you study successful strategies across different fields and extract the universal principles. You look for recurring themes in champion behavior. You identify the patterns that separate winners from losers. You develop the ability to see the game behind the game. The second principle of strategic thinking is scenario planning. You need to think through multiple possible futures and prepare for each of them. You need to anticipate different outcomes and position yourself to succeed, regardless of which scenario unfolds. You need to expect the best, but prepare for everything. Champions don't just plan for success. They plan for success, failure, and everything in between. They don't just hope for the best case scenario. They prepare for multiple scenarios. They don't just react to unexpected events. They anticipate unexpected events and prepare responses in advance. Scenario planning means you systematically imagine different ways your situation could evolve and create contingency plans for each possibility. You don't just prepare for what you expect to happen. You prepare for what could happen. You don't just plan for favorable conditions. You plan for adverse conditions. The third principle of strategic thinking is leverage identification. You need to find the points where small actions create large results. You need to identify the critical factors that have disproportionate impact on your outcomes. You need to focus your energy on the activities that produce maximum return on investment. Champions understand leverage better than anyone else. They know how to get the most results from the least effort. They know which actions produce the biggest impact. They know where to apply pressure to create maximum change. They focus on the vital few instead of the trivial many. Leverage identification means you constantly ask yourself, what's the one thing I could do that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? You look for the key that unlocks multiple doors. You search for the domino that knocks down all the other dominoes. You find the leverage point that moves mountains. The fourth principle of strategic thinking is competitive positioning. You need to understand not just how to play the game, but how to change the game. You need to position yourself in ways that make competition irrelevant. You need to create advantages that are difficult for others to copy or counter. Champions don't just compete in existing markets. They create new markets. They don't just play by existing rules. They change the rules. They don't just try to be better than their competition. They make their competition irrelevant by playing a different game entirely. Competitive positioning means you find ways to compete where you can't lose instead of competing where you might lose. You create unique value propositions that can't be copied. You build competitive moats that protect your position. You establish advantages that compound over time. The fifth principle of strategic thinking is timing mastery. You need to understand that timing's everything. You need to know when to act and when to wait, when to push and when to pull back, when to be aggressive and when to be patient. You need to master the rhythm of success. Champions have impeccable timing. They know when markets are ready for their products. They know when opportunities are ripe for exploitation. They know when to strike and when to hold back. They understand that the right action at the wrong time is the wrong action. Timing mastery means you develop sensitivity to the rhythms and cycles that govern success in your field. You learn to read the signs that indicate when conditions are favorable for action. You understand the difference between being early, being on time, and being late. But here's the shocking reality about your strategic thinking abilities. You're still thinking like an amateur when you need to think like a professional. You're still making tactical decisions when you need to make strategic decisions. You're still focusing on immediate problems when you need to focus on long-term positioning. Champions think strategically about everything. They think strategically about their careers, their relationships, their finances, and their personal development. They don't just live day to day. They live decade to decade. They don't just make decisions for today. They make decisions that position them for long-term success. Strategic thinking is not about being manipulative. It's about being thoughtful. It's not about taking advantage of others. It's about taking advantage of opportunities. It's not about being dishonest. It's about being intelligent about how you pursue your goals. You want to know the real secret to strategic thinking? It's not about being smarter than everyone else. It's about thinking differently than everyone else. It's not about having more information. It's about interpreting information better. It's not about seeing more moves. It's about seeing better moves. Champions understand that strategic thinking is a skill that can be developed through deliberate practice. They study strategy in business, military history, sports, and politics. They analyze the strategic decisions of successful people. They practice thinking strategically about their own situations. The process of developing strategic thinking is challenging because it requires you to think beyond your immediate circumstances. It requires you to consider long-term consequences when you're focused on short-term problems. It requires you to think systematically when you're used to thinking reactively. But here's what happens when you master strategic thinking. You start winning before the competition even realizes the game has started. You position yourself for opportunities before opportunities become obvious. You create advantages that compound over time and become impossible for others to overcome. Champions understand that strategic thinking is not just about individual success. It's about creating value for others while advancing your own position. It's about finding win-win solutions that strengthen your position while helping others achieve their goals. Most people will hear about strategic thinking and continue thinking tactically. They'll focus on immediate problems while ignoring long-term positioning. They'll make reactive decisions while champions make proactive decisions. They'll play the game that's in front of them while champions design the game they want to play. You're different. You're not just here to learn about strategic thinking. You're here to master it. You're not just here to understand how champions think ahead. You're here to develop the ability to think 3 steps ahead of everyone else. You're not just here to want strategic thinking. You're here to become a strategic thinker. But strategic thinking without competitive fire is just academic exercise. You need to develop the mindset that not only outthinks the competition, but obliterates them through superior mental programming and execution. Chapter 11. The Competitor's Edge. Champions don't compete with others. They obliterate them. While average people hope to win, champions expect to dominate. While others play to participate, champions play to annihilate their competition. While most people are satisfied with beating their opponents, champions are only satisfied when their opponents are so thoroughly defeated that they question whether they should even be competing. Here's the brutal truth about your competitive mindset. You're still afraid of real competition. You're still playing not to lose instead of playing to win. You're still hoping your competition fails instead of ensuring your competition fails through your superior performance. You're still competing like an amateur when you need to compete like a destroyer. Champions don't just want to win. They want to win so decisively that there's no question about who's superior. They don't just want to beat their competition. They want to demoralize their competition. They don't just want to succeed. They want to succeed so magnificently that their competition gives up trying to compete with them. The first component of the competitor's edge is intimidation factor. You need to develop a presence and performance level that makes your competition nervous before the competition even begins. You need to become so formidable that others doubt their ability to compete with you before they even try. Champions understand that competition begins long before the actual contest. It begins the moment your competition learns they'll be facing you. Champions have built reputations that precede them. Their names alone create doubt in the minds of their competitors. Intimidation factor doesn't mean you try to scare people. It means your track record of excellence speaks so loudly that your competition knows they're facing someone special. It means your preparation is so thorough that others feel underprepared by comparison. It means your confidence is so unshakable that others feel uncertain by contrast. The second component of the competitor's edge is performance superiority. You need to develop skills that are so far above your competition that the gap between you and them seems insurmountable. You need to be so much better at what you do that your competition can't catch up even if they dramatically improve their performance. Champions don't just aim to be slightly better than their competition, they aim to be exponentially better. They don't just want a small advantage. They want an overwhelming advantage. They don't just want to edge out their competitors. They want to lap their competitors. Performance superiority means you set standards that your competition can't match. You develop capabilities that your competition can't duplicate. You achieve results that your competition can't comprehend. You operate at a level that makes your competition look amateur by comparison. The third component of the competitor's edge is mental warfare. You need to understand how to get inside your competition's heads and make them doubt themselves, second-guess their decisions, and lose confidence in their abilities. You need to become a master of psychological pressure. Champions understand that competition is as much mental as it is physical or technical. They know how to apply psychological pressure that makes their opponents crack under stress. They know how to create doubt in their competitors' minds. They know how to make their opponents beat themselves. Mental warfare doesn't mean you cheat or behave unethically. It means you understand the psychological dimensions of competition and use them to your advantage. It means you know how to stay calm when your opponents are nervous. It means you know how to project confidence when your opponents are doubtful. The fourth component of the competitor's edge is preparation obsession. You need to prepare so thoroughly that you're ready for anything your competition can throw at you. You need to anticipate every strategy they might use and develop counters for each one. You need to be more prepared than they could possibly imagine. Champions outwork their competition in practice so they can outperform their competition in contests. They prepare for scenarios their competition never considered. They practice responses to strategies their competition might use. They study their opponents more thoroughly than their opponents study them. Preparation obsession means you leave nothing to chance. You prepare for your competition's strengths and their weaknesses. You anticipate their best strategies and their desperate strategies. You prepare for favorable conditions and adverse conditions. You prepare to win regardless of what your competition does. The fifth component of the competitor's edge is killer instinct. You need to develop the ability to finish off your competition when you have them beaten. You need to show no mercy when you have the advantage. You need to understand that competition is war, and in war, you don't just defeat your enemies, you destroy them. Champions don't just win. They win convincingly. They don't just beat their competition. They demolish their competition. They don't just achieve victory. They achieve dominant victory that sends a message to future competitors about what happens when you face a champion. Killer instinct means you don't ease up when you're ahead. You accelerate when you're ahead. You don't get comfortable when you're winning. You get more aggressive when you're winning. You don't show mercy to your competition. You show them what true superiority looks like. But here's the shocking truth about your competitive mindset. You're still afraid of dominating others. You're still playing with kid gloves when you need to be playing with killer instinct. You're still trying to be nice when you need to be trying to be superior. You're still competing to participate when you need to be competing to obliterate. Champions understand that being competitive is not about being mean. It's about being superior. It's not about hurting others. It's about helping yourself win. It's not about being unsportsmanlike. It's about being undeniably better than everyone else. The competitor's edge is not about being a bad person. It's about being a dominant performer. It's not about lacking sportsmanship. It's about having winning obsession. It's not about being unfair. It's about being unbeatable. You want to know the real secret to developing a competitor's edge? It's not about hating your competition. It's about loving victory more than you fear defeat. It's not about wanting others to fail. It's about refusing to accept your own failure. It's not about being negative toward others. It's about being relentlessly positive about your own dominance. Champions respect their competition, but they don't fear their competition. They study their competition, but they don't copy their competition. They acknowledge their competition, but they don't accept being second to their competition. The process of developing a competitor's edge is uncomfortable because it requires you to embrace the idea that you can be superior to others. It requires you to believe that you deserve to win more than your competition deserves to win. It requires you to pursue dominance instead of settling for adequacy. But here's what happens when you develop a true competitor's edge. You start winning contests before they begin because your reputation precedes you. You start intimidating your competition through your preparation and presence. You start dominating your field because you refuse to accept anything less than total victory. Champions understand that the competitor's edge is not just about beating others. It's about pushing others to become better through your example of excellence. It's about raising the standards in your field through your superior performance. Most people will hear about developing a competitor's edge and continue competing casually. They'll play not to lose, while champions play to dominate. They'll hope for victory, while champions expect victory. They'll accept close losses, while champions accept only decisive victories. You're different. You're not just here to learn about competition. You're here to master it. You're not just here to understand how champions compete. You're here to develop the killer instinct that separates champions from everyone else. You're not just here to want to win. You're here to become someone who always wins. But having a competitor's edge without a mastery mentality is just winning without improvement. You need to develop an obsession with getting better that never ends, regardless of how successful you become. Chapter 12. Mastery Mentality. Champions never stop improving. They're obsessed with perfection. While average people get comfortable with good enough, champions are tormented by anything less than excellent. While others celebrate reaching their goals, champions immediately set bigger goals. While most people rest on their achievements, champions use their achievements as launching pads for greater achievements. Here's the brutal reality about your current relationship with mastery. You haven't even scratched the surface of mastery. You think you're good at something because you're better than average. You think you've mastered something because you've learned the basics. But mastery isn't about being better than other people. Mastery is about being better than you were yesterday, and tomorrow being better than you are today. Champions understand something that will shock you. There is no finish line in mastery. There is no point where you can say you've arrived. There is no level where you can stop improving. Mastery is an infinite game, and champions play infinite games to become infinitely better. The first principle of mastery mentality is perfection pursuit. You need to become obsessed with perfect execution, even though you know perfection is impossible to achieve. You need to pursue the impossible standard, because the pursuit itself creates excellence that would be impossible to achieve by pursuing achievable standards. Champions don't pursue perfection because they think they can achieve it. They pursue perfection because the pursuit of perfection produces a level of excellence that pursuing excellence could never produce. They aim for impossible standards because impossible standards create possible breakthroughs. Perfection pursuit means you're never satisfied with your current performance level. You always see room for improvement. You always identify ways to execute better. You always find details that could be refined. You become someone who gets better even when others think you're already the best. The second principle of mastery mentality is deliberate practice. You need to systematically work on your weaknesses instead of just repeating your strengths. You need to practice at the edge of your capabilities instead of in your comfort zone. You need to focus on improvement instead of just performance. Champions don't just practice. They practice deliberately. They don't just repeat activities. They repeat activities with the specific intention of improving specific aspects of their performance. They don't just put in time. They put in focused time designed to produce specific improvements. Deliberate practice means you identify your weaknesses and attack them systematically. You break down complex skills into component parts and improve each part individually. You practice in conditions that are more difficult than performance conditions. You seek feedback that helps you identify areas for improvement. The third principle of mastery mentality is continuous learning. You need to maintain beginner's mind even when you become an expert. You need to keep studying your field even when you know more than most people in your field. You need to remain teachable even when you become the teacher. Champions are lifelong learners. They never stop studying. They never stop asking questions. They never stop seeking new information. They understand that the moment you think you know everything is the moment you stop improving. Continuous learning means you stay curious about your field. You read books, attend seminars, seek mentors, and study the best practices of others in your industry. You remain open to new ideas even when those ideas challenge your current methods. You treat every experience as a learning opportunity. The fourth principle of mastery mentality is standard elevation. You need to constantly raise your standards for what constitutes acceptable performance. You need to make yesterday's best performance today's minimum standard. You need to become someone who gets better at getting better. Champions don't just raise their performance, they raise their standards. They don't just improve their results, they improve their expectations for their results. They don't just get better, they demand better from themselves. Standard elevation means you're constantly redefining what good enough means to you. You make exceptional performance your normal performance. You turn outstanding results into standard results. You create a culture of excellence within yourself that makes mediocrity impossible. The fifth principle of mastery mentality is teaching integration. You need to teach what you're learning because teaching forces you to understand your knowledge at a deeper level. You need to mentor others because mentoring others makes you examine your own processes and improve them. Champions are teachers. They share their knowledge because sharing knowledge deepens knowledge. They mentor others because mentoring forces them to articulate their methods and improve their methods. They understand that teaching is learning at the highest level. Teaching integration means you look for opportunities to share your expertise with others. You explain your methods to teammates. You mentor people who are trying to improve in your field. You create content that helps others understand what you've learned. But here's the shocking truth about your relationship with mastery. You're still satisfied with being good when you need to be obsessed with being great. You're still accepting current performance levels when you need to be demanding higher performance levels. You're still thinking, you know enough when you need to be knowing you don't know enough. Champions are never satisfied, not because they're ungrateful, but because satisfaction kills improvement. Not because they don't appreciate their progress, but because appreciation without aspiration leads to stagnation. Not because they can't enjoy their success, but because they know their current success is just preparation for greater success. The mastery mentality is not about being perfectionist. It's about being progressionist. It's not about never being satisfied. It's about never being stagnant. It's not about always pushing harder. It's about always pushing smarter. You want to know the real secret to mastery mentality? It's not about being the best. It's about becoming better. It's not about achieving perfection. It's about pursuing perfection. It's not about reaching the top. It's about always climbing higher. Champions understand that mastery is not a destination. It's a direction. It's not something you achieve once and then maintain. It's something you pursue continuously and improve constantly. It's not about being perfect. It's about being perfectible. The process of developing mastery mentality is humbling because it requires you to accept that you'll never be finished improving. It requires you to embrace being a perpetual student. It requires you to find satisfaction in the process of improvement rather than in any final achievement. But here's what happens when you develop true mastery mentality. You become someone who gets better every day. You become someone who never plateaus because you never stop climbing. You become someone who achieves things that others think are impossible because you pursue improvement that others think is unnecessary. Champions understand that mastery mentality is not just about individual achievement. It's about pushing the boundaries of what's possible in your field. It's about discovering new levels of performance that inspire others to raise their own standards. Most people will hear about mastery mentality and continue accepting good enough. They'll celebrate early achievements while champions use early achievements as motivation for greater achievements. They'll rest on their accomplishments, while champions build on their accomplishments. You're different. You're not just here to learn about mastery. You're here to pursue it relentlessly. You're not just here to understand how champions improve. You're here to become someone who never stops improving. You're not just here to want mastery. You're here to live mastery every single day. But mastery mentality without systematic daily implementation is just aspiration without application. You need to create the daily systems and rituals that turn your champion mindset into champion results. Chapter 13. The Champion's Daily System. Champions don't have good days and bad days. They have systems. While average people leave their performance to chance, champions engineer their performance through systematic daily rituals. While others hope for motivation to strike, champions create motivation through structured routines. While most people are controlled by their circumstances, champions control their circumstances through their systems. Here's the brutal truth about your current daily routine. It's keeping you average. The way you start your day, the way you structure your time, the way you end your day is programming you for mediocrity instead of excellence. Your daily systems are either building champion habits or destroying champion potential, and right now, they're destroying it. Champions understand that extraordinary results come from ordinary activities performed extraordinarily well. They understand that daily systems compound over time to create massive results. They understand that how you do anything is how you do everything, and they structure their days to reinforce excellence in everything they do. The first component of the champion's daily system is morning domination. You need to win the first hour of your day because how you start determines how you finish. You need to begin each day with activities that energize your body, focus your mind, and align your spirit with your goals. Champions don't check their phones when they wake up. They don't start their days reacting to other people's agendas. They don't begin with activities that scatter their focus or drain their energy. They start their days with intentional activities that prepare them for peak performance. Morning domination means you create a morning routine that energizes you physically, mentally, and emotionally. You exercise to activate your body. You meditate to focus your mind. You review your goals to align your actions. You prepare for the day instead of just starting the day. The second component of the champion's daily system is priority precision. You need to identify your most important activities and protect time for them before anything else can interfere. You need to do your most important work when you have your most energy, instead of leaving it for when you're tired. Champions eat their frogs first. They tackle their most challenging tasks when they're fresh. They protect their peak energy for their peak priorities. They don't save their most important work for the end of the day when they're exhausted. Priority precision means you identify the activities that produce the most results and schedule them when you're at your best. You don't let urgent activities crowd out important activities. You don't let other people's priorities take precedence over your priorities. You protect your time like champions. Protect their territory. The third component of the champion's daily system is energy optimization. You need to manage your physical and mental energy throughout the day so you can maintain peak performance for extended periods. You need to understand your natural rhythms and structure your day to work with them instead of against them. Champions don't just manage their time. They manage their energy. They know when they perform best, and they schedule their most important work during those times. They know when they need recovery, and they build recovery into their schedules. They understand that energy management is more important than time management. Energy optimization means you identify when you're naturally at your best and schedule your most important work during those times. You take breaks before you need them. You fuel your body with foods that enhance rather than drain your energy. You structure your day to maintain peak performance instead of hoping peak performance happens accidentally. The fourth component of the champion's daily system is progress tracking. You need to measure your progress daily so you can make adjustments quickly when you're off track. You need to celebrate small wins to maintain motivation and identify small problems before they become big problems. Champions measure what matters. They track their progress on their most important goals. They review their performance daily and make adjustments immediately when needed. They don't wait until the end of the week or month to assess their progress. They assess their progress daily and course correct immediately. Progress tracking means you have systems for monitoring your advancement toward your goals. You review your performance each day and identify what worked and what didn't work. You celebrate your wins to build momentum and analyze your losses to prevent repetition. The fifth component of the Champion's Daily System is evening reflection. You need to end each day by reviewing your performance, planning the next day, and programming your subconscious mind for success while you sleep. You need to finish each day intentionally instead of just letting it end. Champions don't just collapse at the end of the day. They complete each day by reviewing what they accomplished, what they learned, and what they'll improve tomorrow. They plan the next day before the next day arrives. They program their minds for success while they sleep. Evening reflection means you create a nighttime routine that helps you process the day's events, plan for tomorrow's challenges, and prepare your mind for restorative sleep. You review your wins and losses. You plan your priorities for tomorrow. You visualize success for upcoming challenges. But here's the shocking reality about your current daily systems. They're random instead of systematic. They're reactive instead of proactive. They're casual instead of strategic. You're leaving your performance to chance when you should be engineering your performance through superior systems. Champions understand that daily systems are the bridge between goals and achievements. Goals are what you want to accomplish. Systems are how you accomplish them. Champions focus more on perfecting their systems than on achieving their goals. Because perfect systems produce perfect results automatically. The Champion's Daily System is not about being rigid. It's about being intentional. It's not about having no flexibility. It's about having structure that supports flexibility. It's not about controlling every moment. It's about controlling the moments that matter most. You want to know the real secret to Champion Daily Systems? It's not about having perfect days. It's about having systematic days. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about systematically minimizing mistakes. It's not about being perfect. It's about being consistently excellent. Champions understand that daily systems compound over time. Small improvements in your daily routine create massive improvements in your life results. Tiny optimizations in your daily systems produce enormous optimizations in your long-term outcomes. The process of creating Champion Daily Systems is challenging because it requires you to give up spontaneity for structure, casualness for intentionality, and randomness for system. It requires you to become someone who engineers their days instead of just experiencing their days. But here's what happens when you create Champion Daily Systems. Your performance becomes predictable instead of unpredictable. Your results become consistent instead of inconsistent. Your progress becomes inevitable instead of accidental. Champions understand that daily systems are not just about individual performance. They're about creating a lifestyle that supports your highest aspirations. They're about becoming the kind of person who achieves their goals as a natural result of who they are and how they live. Most people will hear about daily systems and continue living randomly. They'll hope for good days while champions create good days. They'll depend on motivation while champions depend on systems. They'll leave their performance to chance while champions engineer their performance through design. You're different. You're not just here to learn about daily systems. You're here to create them. You're not just here to understand how champions structure their days. You're here to structure your days like a champion. You're not just here to want better daily habits. You're here to build better daily systems. But having Champion Daily Systems without knowing how to handle both success and failure will sabotage your long-term development. You need to develop the psychological skills to manage victory and defeat with equal wisdom. Chapter 14. Handling Success and Failure. Champions handle victory and defeat the same way. Strategically. While average people get drunk on success and devastated by failure, champions use both as fuel for their fire. While others celebrate victories by relaxing their standards, champions celebrate victories by raising their standards. While most people let failure destroy their confidence, champions let failure strengthen their resolve. Here's the brutal truth about how you currently handle success and failure. You don't know how to handle real success yet. You've never achieved anything significant enough to test your character under the pressure of victory. And you definitely don't know how to handle real failure because you've been protected from the kind of devastating defeats that reveal who you really are. Champions understand something that will shock you. Success is more dangerous than failure. Success makes you soft, while failure makes you strong. Success makes you complacent, while failure makes you hungry. Success makes you think you've arrived, while failure reminds you that you're still traveling. The first principle of handling success is victory vigilance. You need to become more paranoid about losing when you're winning than when you're losing. You need to work harder to maintain success than you worked to achieve success. You need to understand that success is not a destination you reach, but a standard you maintain. Champions don't celebrate success by relaxing. They celebrate success by accelerating. They don't use victory as an excuse to ease up. They use victory as evidence that they need to work even harder because now they have something to protect and everyone is coming for them. Victory vigilance means you become more disciplined when you're successful, not less disciplined. You raise your standards when you achieve your goals instead of lowering your standards. You increase your effort when you're ahead instead of decreasing your effort. The second principle of handling success is humility maintenance. You need to stay connected to the work and the process that created your success instead of getting lost in the results and recognition that success brings. You need to remember that success is temporary and can be lost faster than it was gained. Champions know that success is rented, not owned, and the rent is due every day. They don't let success go to their heads because they know that heads that are too big become targets for people who want to knock them off. They stay humble, not because they're insecure, but because they're intelligent. Humility maintenance means you attribute your success to the right factors. You give credit to your preparation, your team, and your process instead of just taking credit for your talent. You remain teachable even when you become the teacher. You stay hungry even when you're fed. The third principle of handling success is legacy thinking. You need to understand that real success is not about what you achieve for yourself, but about what you create for others. You need to focus on building something that lasts longer than your personal accomplishments. Champions think beyond their own achievements. They think about the impact they're having on their industry, their community, and the people who come after them. They understand that true greatness is measured not by what you accomplish, but by what you enable others to accomplish. Legacy thinking means you use your success as a platform to create value for others. You mentor people who are trying to achieve what you've achieved. You share your knowledge to help others avoid the mistakes you made. You use your influence to make your field better than you found it. The fourth principle of handling failure is failure acceleration. You need to fail faster, learn faster, and recover faster than your competition. You need to extract maximum learning from every failure and convert that learning into improved performance immediately. Champions don't just bounce back from failure, they bounce forward from failure. They don't just recover from setbacks, they use setbacks as setups for comebacks. They don't just survive defeats, they thrive because of defeats. Failure acceleration means you develop systems for processing failure quickly and extracting lessons immediately. You don't waste time feeling sorry for yourself. You don't spend energy blaming others. You focus all your attention on what you can learn and how you can improve. The fifth principle of handling failure is resilience building. You need to use every failure as training for your mental toughness. You need to let every setback strengthen your character instead of weaken your resolve. You need to become stronger because of your failures, not despite them. Champions understand that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of success. It's not something that happens to you on the way to success. It's something that happens because you're pursuing success. Champions fail more than average people because champions attempt more than average people. Resilience building means you interpret failure as evidence that you're pushing your limits, not evidence that you're inadequate. You see setbacks as proof that you're taking risks, not proof that you're incapable. You view defeats as education, not elimination. But here's the shocking truth about your relationship with success and failure. You don't know how to handle real success because you haven't achieved real success yet. And you don't know how to handle real failure because you haven't risked real failure yet. You're still playing in the shallow end when champions play in the deep end. Champions have a different relationship with both success and failure because they understand that both are temporary states, not permanent identities. They don't let success make them soft, and they don't let failure make them quit. They use both as fuel for continued improvement. The ability to handle success and failure strategically is what separates champions from people who have brief moments of success. Most people can handle one or the other, but not both. They either get destroyed by failure or corrupted by success. Champions use both as stepping stones to greater achievement. You want to know the real secret to handling success and failure. It's not about feeling good about success or bad about failure. It's about learning from both and using both to become better. It's not about avoiding failure or guaranteeing success. It's about leveraging both for continuous improvement. Champions understand that how you handle success determines whether you get more success. How you handle failure determines whether you get another chance at success. Both are tests of your character, and champions pass both tests by staying focused on improvement instead of getting distracted by emotions. The process of learning to handle success and failure strategically is challenging because it requires you to develop emotional regulation skills that most people never develop. It requires you to separate your identity from your results and your self-worth from your outcomes. But here's what happens when you master the ability to handle success and failure strategically. You become unshakable. Success doesn't make you soft, and failure doesn't make you quit. You become someone who gets stronger regardless of what happens to you. Champions understand that handling success and failure strategically is not just about personal resilience. It's about modeling for others how to maintain perspective during both good times and bad times. It's about showing others that character is consistent, regardless of circumstances. Most people will hear about handling success and failure strategically and continue letting their emotions control their responses to both. They'll get too high when they win and too low when they lose. They'll let success make them lazy and failure make them hopeless. You're different. You're not just here to learn about handling success and failure. You're here to master both. You're not just here to understand how champions respond to victory and defeat. You're here to develop the emotional regulation that allows you to use both for continued growth. But mastering success and failure without building a lasting legacy is just personal achievement without lasting impact. You need to understand what it really means to live like a champion and create something that outlasts your individual accomplishments. Chapter 15. The Champion's Legacy. Champions don't just win, they create legacies. While average people focus on what they can get, champions focus on what they can give. While others measure success by what they accumulate, champions measure success by what they contribute. While most people want to be remembered for what they achieved, champions want to be remembered for what they enabled others to achieve. Here's the brutal reality about your current impact on the world. You're not creating a legacy worth remembering. You're focused on your own success instead of focusing on creating success for others. You're building a life instead of building a legacy. You're thinking about what you can achieve instead of what you can enable. Champions understand that true greatness is not about personal accomplishment. It's about collective advancement. It's not about what you can do for yourself. It's about what you can do for others. It's not about being the best. It's about bringing out the best in others. The first component of championship legacy is multiplication impact. You need to focus on creating other champions instead of just being a champion yourself. You need to understand that your greatest achievement is not what you accomplish, but what you help others accomplish. Champions are multipliers. They don't just achieve greatness. They create greatness in others. They don't just reach their potential. They help others reach their potential. They don't just succeed. They create success systems that others can use to succeed. Multiplication impact means you measure your success by how many people you've helped succeed. You judge your leadership by how many leaders you've developed. You evaluate your influence by how much influence you've enabled others to gain. The second component of championship legacy is knowledge transfer. You need to systematically share what you've learned, so others don't have to learn it through trial and error. You need to document your processes so others can build on your foundation instead of starting from scratch. Champions are teachers. They understand that knowledge hoarded is knowledge wasted. They share their insights because they know that shared knowledge grows while hoarded knowledge stagnates. They teach others because they understand that teaching is the highest form of learning. Knowledge transfer means you create systems for passing on what you've learned. You write down your processes. You mentor people who are coming up behind you. You create content that helps others avoid the mistakes you made and accelerate their progress. The third component of championship legacy is standard elevation. You need to raise the standards in your field so everyone who comes after you operates at a higher level. You need to push the boundaries of what's possible so others can achieve things that were previously impossible. Champions don't just play the game at a high level. They change the game so everyone has to play at a higher level. They don't just excel within existing standards. They create new standards that force everyone else to elevate their performance. Standard elevation means you refuse to accept the current standards as the final standards. You push beyond what's been done before. You achieve things that others thought were impossible. You create new benchmarks that inspire others to reach higher. The fourth component of championship legacy is culture creation. You need to create environments where excellence is expected, mediocrity is unacceptable, and continuous improvement is the norm. You need to build cultures that outlast your personal involvement. Champions are culture creators. They don't just perform excellently in whatever culture they find. They create cultures of excellence wherever they go. They establish standards, systems, and expectations that continue to produce excellent results even after they're gone. Culture creation means you intentionally design environments that bring out the best in people. You establish values that guide behavior. You create systems that reward excellence and eliminate mediocrity. You build cultures that are self-reinforcing and self-improving. The fifth component of championship legacy is next-generation development. You need to focus on developing the people who will surpass your achievements. You need to create champions who are better than you are. You need to measure your success by how much better your successors are than you. Champions want to be surpassed. They don't want to be the best forever. They want to enable someone else to become better than they are. They understand that true legacy is not about being remembered as the best, but about enabling others to become the best. Next generation development means you actively work to develop people who will exceed your achievements. You share your knowledge freely. You provide opportunities for others to grow. You celebrate when others surpass you instead of feeling threatened by it. But here's the shocking truth about your current legacy trajectory. You're not even thinking about legacy yet. You're still focused on your own achievement instead of others' achievement. You're still trying to get instead of trying to give. You're still building a career instead of building a movement. Champions think beyond their own careers. They think about the impact they're having on their industry, their community, and the world. They understand that personal success without positive impact is just sophisticated selfishness. The champion's legacy is not about being perfect. It's about being influential. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about helping others learn from your mistakes. It's not about being the greatest. It's about creating greatness in others. You want to know the real secret to building a champion's legacy. It's not about what you accomplish for yourself. It's about what you enable others to accomplish. It's not about how great you become. It's about how many people you help become great. Champions understand that legacy is not created by accident. It's created by intention. It's not something that happens automatically when you achieve success. It's something you have to deliberately build while you're achieving success. The process of building a champion's legacy is demanding because it requires you to focus on others' success while pursuing your own success. It requires you to give away your advantages to help others develop their own advantages. It requires you to think beyond your own lifetime. But here's what happens when you focus on building a champion's legacy. Your individual achievements become more meaningful because they're connected to something larger than yourself. Your success becomes more satisfying because it's creating success for others. Champions understand that legacy is not about being remembered. It's about creating impact that continues long after you're forgotten. It's not about what people say about you. It's about what they're able to achieve because of what you created. Most people will hear about building a legacy and continue focusing on their own achievement. They'll measure success by what they get instead of what they give. They'll build careers instead of building movements. They'll focus on personal accomplishment instead of collective advancement. You're different. You're not just here to learn about legacy. You're here to create one. You're not just here to understand how champions think about impact. You're here to start thinking about the impact you want to have. You're not just here to achieve success. You're here to enable success for others. But building a legacy is meaningless if you don't commit to the daily actions required to become the person capable of creating that legacy. The time for learning is over. The time for transformation has begun. Closing challenge. You've heard everything you need to hear. You understand what separates champions from everyone else. You know the principles, the processes, and the practices that create champion-level results. You have the knowledge. The question is, do you have the courage to apply it? Here's the brutal reality that most people refuse to face. Most people will close this video and do nothing. They'll go back to their old patterns, their old habits, and their old thinking. They'll return to the mental weakness that's been keeping them trapped. They'll choose comfort over growth, safety over success, and mediocrity over mastery. They'll make excuses about why they can't implement these principles. They'll say they don't have time, they don't have resources, they don't have support. But those aren't reasons. Those are excuses. And excuses are the enemy of excellence. You have a choice to make right now. You can be like the 99% who hear about champion principles, but never apply them. You can continue living with the mental patterns that have been keeping you average. You can keep accepting mediocrity as your standard. Or you can make the decision to become a champion starting right now. You can commit to the mental transformation that will change everything about your life. You can choose to implement these principles with the relentless determination that separates champions from wannabes. But understand this, choosing the champion's path is not easy. It's not comfortable. It's not convenient. It requires you to think differently, act differently, and live differently than most people are willing to think, act, and live. It requires you to embrace discomfort when others seek comfort. It requires you to persist when others quit. It requires you to maintain standards when others lower standards. It requires you to take responsibility when others make excuses. It requires you to build discipline when others rely on motivation. It requires you to develop mental toughness when others choose mental weakness. It requires you to focus intensely when others live distracted. It requires you to compete fiercely when others compete casually. It requires you to pursue mastery when others accept adequacy. It requires you to think strategically when others think tactically. It requires you to handle success and failure with equal wisdom when others are controlled by both. Most people are not willing to pay this price. Most people want champion results without champion effort. Most people want to win without doing what winners do. Most people want the benefits of champion thinking without the commitment to champion thinking. But you're not most people. You're here because you're ready to make the commitment. You're here because you're willing to do what others won't do. You're here because you understand that champion thinking is not optional if you want champion results. Starting right now, this moment, you need to make 3 critical decisions that will determine whether you become a champion or remain average. First, you need to decide that you will no longer accept your current mental patterns. You will no longer tolerate limiting beliefs, excuse-making, victim mentality, or mental weakness in any form. You will ruthlessly eliminate every thought pattern that doesn't serve your success. Second, you need to decide that you will implement these champion principles immediately and consistently. You will not wait for perfect conditions. You will not delay until you feel ready. You will begin today to think like a champion, act like a champion, and live like a champion. Third, you need to decide that you will maintain champion standards regardless of circumstances. You will not lower your standards when things get difficult. You will not compromise your principles when others pressure you to compromise. You will be a champion even when no one is watching. These decisions are not suggestions. They are requirements. They are not options. They are obligations. They are not recommendations. They are commandments for anyone who wants to join the ranks of champions. The moment you make these decisions, everything changes. You stop being controlled by circumstances and start controlling circumstances. You stop reacting to life and start creating life. You stop being average and start becoming extraordinary. But making these decisions is just the beginning. The real test is whether you can maintain these decisions when the excitement fades, when motivation disappears, when obstacles appear, and when everyone around you is telling you to give up. Champions are not made in moments of inspiration. They are made in moments of decision to continue when everything in them wants to quit. They are forged in the daily choice to maintain champion standards when champion standards feel impossible to maintain. You have everything you need to become a champion. You have the knowledge, you have the principles, you have the framework, you have the blueprint. The only thing missing is your unbreakable commitment to implement what you've learned. The world does not need another person who knows about champion principles but never applies them. The world needs champions who live these principles, breathe these principles, and become these principles. Will you be someone who just learned about the winner's mindset? Or will you be someone who developed the winner's mindset? Will you be someone who understood how champions think? Or will you be someone who became a champion thinker? The choice is yours. It has always been yours. And now you have no excuse for making the wrong choice because you know exactly what the right choice requires. Your transformation begins now. Your journey to championship starts today. Your development of the winner's mindset begins this moment. Stop making excuses. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. Stop looking for more information. You have everything you need. The only question that remains is whether you have the courage to become everything you're capable of becoming. Champions are not born. They are made. They are made through decision, through commitment, through discipline, and through relentless pursuit of excellence in every area of their lives. You are not the same person who started listening to this. You now have the mental framework to think like a champion. You have the psychological tools to act like a champion. You have the strategic knowledge to compete like a champion. But knowledge without application is worthless. Understanding without implementation is useless. Learning without living is meaningless. The time for learning is over. The time for excuses is finished. The time for delay has ended. The time for championship has begun. The question is not whether you can become a champion. The question is whether you will become a champion. Your future is waiting. Your potential is calling. Your championship is possible. But only if you decide right now that you will pay the price, do the work, and become the person capable of champion-level results. Make the decision. Make the commitment. Make the transformation. Become the champion you were born to be. Your journey starts now.